Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we complete a 3-day program on cooling our climate crisis, as we've looked at various aspects of climate change. As we begin our program today, I just want to recall to all of our attention what was released 3 days ago as we began the program by the World Meteorological Organization, saying that sometime between now and 2027, global temperatures are going to rise above 1.5 degrees centigrade over pre-industrial levels. We all need to take that in, that the human race is now on the threshold of crossing a milestone, that if we cross that milestone and global temperatures begin to consistently be above 1.5 degree temperature above pre-industrial levels, we're essentially moving into an unimaginable climate chaos. It's something that the entire human race needs to take in. And very sadly, our governments and the mainstream media didn't even bother to note it much. And there's been essentially little or no response because the world is preoccupied with war. War in Ukraine against Russia, escalating war preparations between the United States and China, a deconstruction of the global order, sanctions, possible nuclear exchange. So right at the moment when we're about ready to cross an irretrievable threshold of ecological destruction, we are engaging in war with such tenacity and celebration that we brought the world to the most dangerous moment since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. It's madness, what we are collectively ignoring and what we're collectively celebrating. For the world to be at war, for the United States to be fomenting war against Russia in Ukraine and against China around Taiwan, may be the most strategic mistake, certainly in modern history and possibly world history, because what we need to be doing collectively right now is embracing Russia, China, India, every country in the world, to do everything that we can to make sure that we don't cross that 1.5 degrees centigrade threshold. And the fact that there's not even a discussion, is a measure of the predicament that we're in. I saw a news report last night about the drought in Spain that I'd been following over the last several months, but I hadn't taken in that the Spanish ministries are saying that 75% of Spain is now in active desertification, and that drought, as they're predicting it, will become a permanent state as Spain and southern Italy and Greece dramatically escalate the desertification process that is destroying their ecologies and their economies. And meanwhile, there's unprecedented flooding in Spain, in Italy, and climate disasters are escalating all over the world, and still we sleep. It's an extraordinary moment for humanity, an extraordinary amnesia, an extraordinary unconscious participation in the very forces and trajectories that are leading us to our doom. And yet we seem at a collective level incapable, and our governments unwilling to not only deal with the gravity of the crisis, but to reorient our national, domestic, and international policies so that we can save ourselves. And we may go down as that generation that threw it all away. And we all need to take this in so that when we, as we will do in a moment, think about how we cool our climate, how we take the actions necessary, knowing that our governments are steadfastly refusing. It puts the onus and the accountability and the responsibility on we, the people, to somehow do something in the face of complete abdication on the part of our national governments and international institutions. It's an extraordinary situation in which we find ourselves. And I don't know really what to say about it. And I don't know really what to do about it, other than, as we do day by day on Humanity Rising, just bring to public attention, as we've done in this program this week around climate, what's being done out there by people who are aware and are largely working with very small resources and limited capacity to make the kind of difference that they know, and we all know, the world needs to be making proactively before it is really too late. And with the announcement that we're going to cross the threshold of the 1.5 degrees centigrade rise over pre-industrial levels, we're being given a warning and a clarion call that cannot and should not be denied. And that's why I'm raising it once again, just so all of us can just hold the contradictions that are besetting humanity at this time. And this is the reason why we breathe together, as you all know, because as the chaos externally to ourselves gets more intense, the need for inner coherence becomes more urgent. And so in a moment, you're going to hear the sound of a bell. When you hear that bell, just breathe in. You'll hear another bell and just breathe out slowly. We're going to take 10 breaths together. Then we will begin our program. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Humanity Rising. Let us breathe as one. Thank you, everyone. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Elisa Collin, who has been on the program on the first day. She is a designer and researcher with a focus on water and biodiversity. So Elisa, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising, and I turn the program over to you and your colleagues.
Thank you very much, Jim. Hi, I'm Eliza. I'm calling in from Turin, and I'm really hoping my Wi-Fi is going to hold out. So just let me know if it's not. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this final day of the Cooling Climate Chaos Conference. And so for the last two sessions, we've been exploring the living planet with Peter Bunyard, which was yesterday, and the day before, regeneration with Rob DeLayat. And today I'm leading on this as the kind of third part of this team, and as a designer and researcher. And we'll be hearing from a few other people that are doing really incredible works in the field of regeneration. So to introduce myself a little bit, and I'm going to send you some links in the chat because I have not time to kind of fully present my work today, but I just wanted to say a bit about what I do. I'm a London-based designer, and my research and design approach has a specific and deep interest in the perceptions and values we place on resources. And within this, water futures has been a current priority domain. The work has resulted in a scrutiny of water-related behaviours and their effects on biodiversity, species evolution, the insensible, spatial justice narratives, and its future fair and equitable distribution of the resource, which is water. The work engages in the development of interventions which serve as a catalyst and prototypes to alternative futures which are not preconceived or dictated from positions of power, but ones which are curated by communities. And these interventions are developed through the design of inclusive methodologies in research and environmentally conscious production. Events alongside these interventions have enabled the visualization and collective realization of diverse and multifaceted futures, and their effects on behaviours, new systems, perspectives, cultivating ways of relating to resources in our environment, and eventual policy making. And currently I'm working on redesigning the domestic kitchen in Palermo in Sicily for their specific water needs. I'm just going to send you some links if anyone wants to have another look into that. And now I'm going to pass the floor to our first speaker, Peter Brucieri, who's calling in from Aotearoa, which is the first time I've used that name, otherwise known as New Zealand, and is an educator, author, researcher, and climate activist. He is the author of the book How Planets Cool and Heal the Climate, and is currently working with a tribal collective in the north of Aotearoa. Thank you, Peter. I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your welcome. And it's wonderful to be here. I've really enjoyed the last 2 days. It was wonderful to hear that Peter Bunyard's elaboration of Gaia. I'm just sharing my screen now. And my good friend Rob.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, I'm just looking for where that icon is. Sorry, it's been sort of, there we go. Yeah. So yeah, this is part 3, and I'll be sort of expanding our palette of actions we can take to heal the climate. A little bit about me first. Oh, hang on. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, here's a little bit about me first, and most of it's true. I'm the author of How Plants Cool and Heal the Climate. That was published just last year. I live here in the north of New Zealand, or Aotearoa, with my wife Huria. And Huria is Māori, so she's one of the indigenous peoples of this land. And as Eliza said, I now work with Te Kaua Taonui, which is a collective of tribes up here in the north. So that exposure to those indigenous cultures has been a great part of my education, because I belong to Reductionists Anonymous. My name is Peter, and I'm a recovering reductionist. And many of you that are watching this too may find that you're a recovering reductionist too. We've been educated in a system that just sort of likes to look at the world as separate pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, but we find it hard to put back together. A little bit like Humpty Dumpty. So this is where I live. This is just looking from just outside my house. So I'm right on the edge of a forest. So that there's a resonance there with Peter and Rob. Now, the story is, as Rob described so well on day one, is that climate change is basically caused by too much CO2 in the atmosphere. And there's a lot of truth to that. And what I find here in my country, when I get a policy document on climate change, emissions reductions will be mentioned there hundreds of times, but finding regeneration or sequestration is difficult. So our policy has sent us down in this very, very narrow interpretation of the symptom and the solution. And trees, in this worldview, are carbon receptacles. That's their main value. They're the trash cans for our atmospheric pollution. But there's a much broader menu of solutions. One of the other difficulties with relying on just stop burning fossil fuels as a solution is that it is actually only available mostly to those of us in the developed world who have the funds to do things like buy electric cars. And of course, I'm doing that too. I've got an electric car. But there are so many other things we can do, and they're so much more potent. And as you've seen, and while Rob was talking about regeneration, he touched on food systems. I think he touched very briefly on the oceans, and of course, also that detoxification of the planet. So if you look at what I'd really like you to focus on while you're watching this is where your agency is in your particular context. And what I'll be doing now is sharing a little more about my context and where I choose to play. I'm going to focus mostly on regenerating food systems, but before I do that, I've just got one slide here on regenerating oceans. Now, I came across this information just last year. Howard Dries of GOES was telling us that the sea surface microlayer, which is between 1 micron and 1,000 micron thick, up to a millimeter, some call it biofilm, has been degraded by pollutants, roughly by 50%, and that's actually allowing more water vapor into the air. So when those rain events come, they are much more intense. Now, that's happening because of pollutants like black carbon, untreated sewage, what do you call them? The forever chemicals. That's just basically killing the plankton and stopping that because the plankton regulates the gas exchange. Now, that's really interesting because that's letting a whole lot more water vapor into the air, and as we know, water vapor is the most potent climate gas. But in green there, you can see that we've got lots of ways we can help the repair of that sea surface microlayer. So if we look at regenerative food systems, they have a massive impact on the climate. So production, processing, distribution, marketing, waste, at every one of those points, we have agency to either work in ways that degenerate or work in ways that heal the climate. Now, you would have seen this with Rob. If you look at my country, it's down in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can see it pulsing away there and contributing a lot more photosynthetic material than many countries, many times its size, especially in the heat of summer in January down here. And I live right at the top, that little peninsula right at the top. And that peninsula has about, well, from the east coast here, there's a harbour about 2 kilometres away, and I'm about 50 kilometres as the crow flies from the west coast. So it's a very skinny peninsula that I live on. 50% of it is pasture. But if you look at that illustration, it's evident that the level of photosynthetic activity is very high in the north. It's warmer here than further south, of course. And it looks like the photosynthesis levels get as good as anywhere in that summer period. Now, just a little bit of a diversion. We're interested in changing the situation away from what Jim alluded to in the introduction. And I like this model from Duncan Green, his book, How Change Happens. And he says there's 4 things that have to happen to really make change work. And that includes laws and policies. So we need our governments to keep moving in the right direction, perhaps to increase their pace. But it's said that we get the governments we deserve. And down here, we have at the moment the centre-left Labour Party is the dominant party in Parliament, but we have an election coming up soon, and the centre-left and the centre-right will be fighting over the middle ground. And it's that middle ground that is not acting with enough urgency at the moment. So it's the social norms and then the individual consciousness and capability that keep us locked in the dominance of the material paradigm that sort of brought these problems on. So, and also to affect change, if you consider your context, all of these things have to be happening. Really, one of the problems with our policies down here in Aotearoa is that the government has determined that methane is a major problem, and because we have a very large ruminant population, but what they're doing is possibly penalizing those farmers for the production of methane. Now, when they calculate based on their models, they determine the methane that is emitted, that is the source of methane, and they completely ignore the sink. And I think they ignore the sink because the major sink for methane is hydroxyl. And the hydroxyl radical oxidizes most of the methane in the atmosphere. Now, we live in a very often wet climate here. We have plenty of water vapor, and water vapor is where hydroxyl is manufactured. More in the tropics, but I'm positive that we have more than enough hydroxyl manufactured here to oxidize that methane than we need. So why I say that is that if we can sustain economic activity while simplifying to an extent and optimizing that sort of activity that is climate friendly, it's good for it gives us the money to take climate action, and it also is more cohesive for our societies. Because what we have here again in Aotearoa is we have farmers who are reviled by city dwellers, and the city dwellers are living in their urban heat islands that are warmer than the farms and sort of throwing rocks at the farmers. So that climate narrative has been quite divisive too. So I've been arguing for a 100% transition to regenerative agriculture by 2030 for this country. And there are some very encouraging signs, and that's working on two sides. On the one side, industrial farming is really struggling. You know, the pandemic has caused all sorts of problems. And then on the other hand, there's some really, there's some good empowering forces to move us towards that policy. And I'll just elaborate on a few of them in these next couple of slides. I'm a member of School Strike for Climate. So here in Aotearoa, and I imagine it's like that in other parts of the world, it's now a intergenerational movement. So they're very happy to embrace the older people, and we can support them in their roles. Now, I've been working with them nationally, having conversations, preparing for our next strike, which is next Friday. And I think that's a global date. And here in Aotearoa, they've determined 4 demands to government. Reduce emissions, and they want real emission reductions. They don't want offsetting. Enable a 100% transition to regenerative agriculture by 2030. Prioritize Te Tiriti-centered climate justice. So from a what we're saying there is that this country is founded on Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi, and the Maori people here have been subject to alienation of their land through colonization, and we're still in the healing phase of that, of getting beyond that. And we recognize here that the Maori worldview, or the Indigenous worldview, has got a lot to offer, and to sort of almost as a antidote to excessive reductionism. And I don't know if you look what you see in where you are, but it's still Western thinking that's dominating the climate narrative, and you know, how's that going for us? Not that well. And the fourth one is lowering the voting age to 16, which is currently 18 here. Now, what really impresses me about these young people is that they get the transition to regenerative agriculture. Back in 2019, when we had big strikes before the pandemic, they were talking about eating less meat, and the vegan narrative that we need to eat, we should eat no meat and that will heal the climate, is really a gross simplification that needs to be far more nuanced. And it's really great to see that these young people in a few years have learned so much. When I compare that to some of our politicians, they're anchored in this ETS global compliance world that is not really getting us anywhere. Now, the other factor is that industrial agriculture is really struggling. Like, for example, increasing internal input costs. Here in Aotearoa, we use superphosphate, and that superphosphate comes from Western Sahara, and there are issues of colonization around that. And that phosphate comes from almost the other side of the world. There's also increasing pressures on farms to include their to better their environmental compliance, and there's a debt burden because the farms seem to need to get bigger and bigger and bigger to survive. Whereas I'll start talking about regenerative agriculture soon. And to put some context around it, if you look at our top 10 exports, and this is a country of 5 million people, so it's probably smaller than some of the cities you're watching this from. 95% of that top 10 comes off the land. mostly. So, and the big ones are dairy and meat. Now, one of the other encouraging factors is that the government is investing in regenerative agriculture. Here's an example here of a research project with Ngaitahu, which is the tribe that from the South Island. And that I've been told that there's possibly about 80 million being spent now or in the pipeline on regenerative agriculture projects. So let's look at the value proposition for regenerative farming here. And these factors are relevant anywhere in the world. I won't look at them all, but we can look at them as financial, environmental, and social, sort of cultural. Just to cherry pick a few, one of the interesting ones is the joy of farming comes back for these farmers. They really get excited by the learning, the new sort of spurt of learning they're going through as they adopt regenerative practices, but they find their farming is just more enjoyable. It's better for the neighbours and the communities because they reduce their dependence on biocides. It's so much better for the soil. And one of the things that's really impressive is the reduction in animal health costs. So if you look at a herd of cows raised on a conventional pasture, they're often in a sort of perpetual state of diarrhea. Now, when they get onto a more diverse pasture, obviously their gut health improves. There's evidence that their gut health improves. The other thing that's interesting for me is that over my time where I live, I've seen the rural population sort of move to the city in this process of urban drift that was going on for over half a century. And now we're starting to see that hopefully reverse. So some of those bigger farms will break up, hopefully, and we'll have more people back in rural communities. So this image is from Calm the Farm, and there's a happy cow for you. Cows are really super intelligent and their dietary choices, probably much more so than you are, and they're able to select exactly what they need to keep them healthy. And when they go into I've had farmers tell me that when the cows go into a paddock, they know exactly what they need. So there's a native flax here, and a farmer told me that he takes a bundle of flax into the paddock and throws it on the ground, and sometimes the cows will almost trample him to get to that flax. Other times they'll just ignore it. So there are healing properties in there that they're looking for. One of the farms that's really impressed me is the Coles farm, which is over on the west coast. And this is their summer crop. So you can see the species that they're planting there includes linseed. So the linseed provides omega-3s for the animals. And you can see the sunflowers are a big part of it too. And the sunflowers really work their magic on the farm. They go down deep, and this guy, he had a paddock. He could only use once, maybe 4 months a year. And after a crop of sunflowers, it's now he's now able to use it year round because it's draining much more effectively. The soil is improved dramatically, and this is all baled up and used for winter feed. And you can see it's much more nutritious than maybe just a maize crop. So this is what Judith Schwartz, the author, says about it. And by the way, that image there is David Coles' sunflowers. When we hear about climate, the story we get is it's all about greenhouse gas emissions and fossil fuels. But in its most basic sense, the story of climate is a story of what happens when sunlight hits the ground, whether the solar energy is incorporated into life forms or becomes sensible heat. What determines the fate of sunlight is natural cycles, the carbon, water, nutrient, and energy cycles, which are driven by the activity of plants, animals, and microbes. In other words, by life. So one of the things that inspired me to write my book was learning about hydrology and learning about the contribution of plants and biomass generally to the health of the climate. So I've got a series of thermal images that I took in the summer last year, and in some cases here I've got them side by side with an image of where the shot was taken. And what you'll find is, generally speaking, the temperature difference is around 20 degrees or sometimes more. So here's an example. There's a path in a public area, and if you look at how those two images juxtapose, you can see that where the trees are and where the grass is, it can be as low as 25 degrees. But the concrete and the bare earth that's been heavily trampled by people, can be up to 47 degrees. And in this particular case, the bare earth is almost as hot as the concrete. So there's a 22-degree difference there. Now, this is both Rob, I think, and Peter talked about latent heat and sensible heat. So the plants are intercepting radiant energy and generating, and latent heat is sent back into the atmosphere. The bare areas and the thin vegetation are heating up with sensible heat, or creating sensible heat. Here's another example. Now, this one is a small park just down the road from me. And that's the margin of the forest I showed you the picture of earlier. And if you look at those that temperature, they interpret those temperatures, you can see that both the pasture and the forest margin are roughly the same temperature. The difference is where the vehicles have traveled over the grass, and there's probably caused some compaction and a bit of a degeneration of that grass. And if you look down the center there, going across that image diagonally, that's the herbicide strip. So the herbicide strip, in this case, is up to 24 degrees warmer than the vegetation. Just consider that you can reduce your carbon dioxide emissions, and that will have a global effect, perhaps a hemispherical effect. But if you are able to extend greenery anywhere on the planet, you're going to have a local effect. And I can't not believe, right, that will aggregate up to a global benefit if we all do it. Here's another one. This is rows of kumara. That's a sweet potato we grow here. And you can see that you can clearly see the rows. So they're humps and hollows. And you can see the blue parts there. It's probably more getting up towards 30 degrees. And the humps where the plants haven't yet completely covered is up to 45 degrees. And that's within probably 20 or 30 centimeters of each other. So a massive temperature difference there. Here's a farm gate. And you can see the farm road in the foreground on the right, the temperature reaching about 52 degrees. And behind that gate, where the pasture is, it's more like 25. So there's a 27 degree difference. just up the road. This is a meridian strip in the road, and that's a native plant there called Coprosma, and that Coprosma is around 32 degrees. And if you look at the mulch, and I used to think mulch was a good thing, and yeah, it has its benefits, but green cover is far superior. The difference there is almost 60 degrees. It's interesting to see that piece of wood lying in the midground, because it has a greater bulk and probably some residual moisture. It's a little bit cooler than the hottest parts of the mulch. And this is my house. This is another side of my house. Now, on this deck, a wisteria grew, and it just happened to find its way up the side of the house and onto the balustrade. And in the summer, it grows quite high and supports itself up to almost the height of the roof. And you can see that this is the northern side, so it shades us beautifully in the summer. Now, where that shade is, you can see, and of course the wisteria, you can see the temperatures down to around 29 degrees, but it's just off the chart there, but it's looking like over 60. Those hot places. And you can tell this yourself, if you walk on a deck, especially if it has a dark color in the summer, sometimes you just can't walk on it. It gets too hot. And so that'll be up around 60 or 70 degrees. It's amazing that there's such variations. And this is, so we have, if you live anywhere in a city, you've got an option somehow of spreading greenery. I want to draw your attention to a couple of wonderful resources. There's the Biotic Pump and How Plants Cool the Planet by Jimmy Soul. Jimmy just completed the plants video just a month or so ago, and the Biotic Pump has had about 100,000 views, something like that. So, if you hark back to that slide that I shared about change, we know we need to change social norms and we need to change consciousness, and so these two videos will help to do that. They really package up those concepts really nicely. Now, to me, perhaps the biggest risk to achieving 100% transition to regenerative agriculture is the emissions reductions narrative. That almost singular focus on emissions reductions. To me, it's more dangerous than pollutants and CO2, which I guess you can call a pollutant. Of course, it's supported by vested interests, but it's changing that narrative is what's really important. So what gives me heart is to see young people becoming far more perceptive and intelligent in their reading of the situation. We need to build networks of networks. We need to have skills of learning, but also is just as important, we need skills of unlearning. And we need success stories. So if we can return back to these tiles of solutions, where do you play? What are the areas where you can make a difference and probably are making a difference now? So I think I'd like to leave you with these questions. What is your context? How does your context shape your climate action? And the last question, where are you in the shift from the emissions paradigm to the living earth paradigm? Because if you consider the emissions paradigm, sometimes we can take on a concept intellectually, and we know that the biotic pump's important. We know that transpiration is probably one of the most our greatest sort of source of agency for healing the climate. But then that emissions paradigm is just so deeply embedded in us that we still sort of default to it. Yeah, and that's me. So I shall stop there, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for signing in so late at night or early in the morning.
Yeah.
And I really like, getting people to think about their specific contexts. It's a really nice place to leave that. So we're going to move on now to another two speakers who are going to speak for a slightly shorter time. One's actually a recorded video that I'll play now, and then we have Hannah Rasper who'll finish, and then we'll have 15 minutes at the end for questions. So for Hannah and for Peter, so please start putting your questions in the chat if you have any. So now we're going to watch a pre-recorded video from a designer. He's the founder of the Amper Design Studio in the Netherlands. And as a starting point, he focuses on our human relationships to the earth and our natural surroundings. Through a process of learning by doing and free experimentation in the field, he finds possibilities for future landscapes or changing perspectives. Tom's ambition is to make connections between previously disconnected fields and create diversity in both societal and natural monocultures. So we're going to show that film now. I'm just going to share that on my screen. Give me one moment. Enjoy.
Yes, hello. Thanks for having me on this nice initiative. My name is Tom Bindels. I'm a designer, a design researcher, and I'm based in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. I mainly work with my design studio, Amper Design, on finding the role between me as a human and ecosystems, and what my role as a maker is within these natural ecosystems. And I think that I will talk a bit about the projects I've been doing in Uganda and Ethiopia, together with soil science called Teun Vogel. And together we've started a foundation that is aiming to restore degraded landscapes, so that desertified landscapes that are degraded due to overgrazing or deforestation or other, the climate crisis. And what we have is, we work research-based, so we do a lot of experiments in the field together with local communities and farmers who know their landscape best, of course. And this is based around a product that I've been developing for a couple of years now, called the Ecosystem Kickstarter. And this product is made out of cardboard, and it's a honeycomb structure with seeds inside it, seeds from pioneering species, so deep-rooting grasses and also plants that fix nitrogen to have a healthier soil life for other vegetation. And normally the problem in a landscape like this is it's not the lack of rain, because there is enough rain, but it falls also increasingly due to climate crisis. It falls in a large amount in a really short period of time, and then there is a long drought. So it's more a problem of how to dose the amount of water during the year. And what we are trying to do is figuring out different ways of slowing down this water runoff. And normally you get this erosion when there is heavy rainfall, erosion of healthy topsoil, and also in general gullies that are created and seeds being washed away. So if the water flow is not slowed down or kept in ponds or gully, like more trenches on the contour line of a slope, then there is a big chance that the ecosystem is no longer able to restore itself. So there is a ecological threshold after which an ecosystem is again able to sustain itself in a certain phase or a certain, but the thing is that if seedlings are trying to sprout and there is a large flow of water, then they get washed away together with the topsoil, and that goes into the nearest stream, and that goes into a lake or a village. And so it's hard for an ecosystem to restore itself once it got to a point that it's this badly degraded. So what we have been trying is to do large-scale experiments of applying terrace-like structures out of honeycomb material made out of cardboard, which of course is biodegradable. And these seeds inside are protected in the first phase against being washed away in the rainy season. And these seeds will sprout, and the rooting structures will go deeper into the soil because they're protected within the honeycomb structure. And afterwards, when the cardboard decomposes, these roots will be strong enough to hold themselves, to hold the seedlings there. And after a while, these seedlings will be able to fulfill this anti-erosion function themselves. So this is kind of the concept, and it's not a new concept. It's been used for ages, and we've been borrowing a lot from different disciplines and permaculture. But we've been noticing after these experiments, we've been working for a while now, is that it has beneficial effects for sure in the beginning when the cardboard is still there, and it has good effects on maintaining or retaining the water and the nutrients from the topsoil, but it's also a cost, of course. Normally farmers can dig a trench on a contour line of a hill, and then the trench will be filled up with water during the rainy season and also sediments and nutrients, and after a while he has to dig another trench because it's full. So what we do is, normally a farmer could plant seedlings as well, but seedlings cost money, more money than seeds. So we've been trying to balance out the fact that you have to buy a product instead of just adding labor, which is much more affordable. Balancing out this investment against using seeds instead of seedlings for the farm. And sometimes it's cost effective, and sometimes it's better to do something else, to dig a trench or to lay a brick wall as a real terrace. And for us it's also almost an excuse, the product, to be able to make a resilient community, because we want to produce it locally and create stimulate the local economy and have a green economy. So regeneration not only in the landscape but also in the communities. And lately we've been thinking about a new product that can also be produced locally, which is not made out of cardboard but vegetation itself. So the problem with cardboard is it has to be made, of course, and that costs energy, and it has to be transported. And of course you can make it out of local materials, such as agricultural waste or other cardboard that is already there. But it's still it's quite an intensive production step that you need to do. So we thought about having a bundle of vegetation, grasses and other agricultural waste, and you bind them with a natural rope. And if you harvest them, for example, the grasses, that are good against erosion. If you harvest them just before the seeds are ripe, you make them into a bundle, then you can put those also on the contour lines of the slope, and you don't need to process them into cardboard first. But we're looking for funding to do our next experiments with that. And also for us, first we've been testing in Uganda, we've been testing in Ethiopia, and this is a beautiful place because you have a very to do experiments also because you have a very concrete start of the raining season, end of the raining season, start of the drought, end of the drought. But this is not everywhere in the world the case. So, for example, in the current Mediterranean situation where you have Italy at the moment with huge floodings and Spain with a lot of drought, the rains are different to anticipate on and to design with as a landscape or as a design researcher. But this is an area that we are definitely leaning towards also because the African context is for us very strange, of course. We are not part of a African community. So it has to be very much adaptable and fitted within the local culture. But these are all very interesting lessons that we are learning, and I think our adventure in Ethiopia and the experiments that we've been doing will definitely get a follow-up. But it also feels healthy to be part of the community more that you are affecting, and that's also another project related to another project that I'm doing in the Netherlands, where I'm trying to get people from the city to get involved more in the countryside and also physically. So we are spending a lot of times, even makers and designers spending a lot of time behind their computers and sitting still, and then we go to do some sports and move a bit to move. But there is an essential way of being part of an ecosystem or a landscape, or that you can connect yourself physically to something that has a rhythm. Or I always use the example of my climate worries. They're very abstract, and you can think about them, you can analyze them, but you won't solve them in your head, this worry, by thinking about it. So how can you fulfill this stress cycle, or how can you close it? Is by going outside and doing something physically in nature or in agricultural land. In the Netherlands we don't really have nature, as you might know, or well, we do, but we made it ourselves. And then if you work on it and connect that physical activity to this abstract sphere, then you kind of resolve it. You get a sense of control back, and this doesn't make the urge to act on the climate crisis less, but makes you part of a community. And this is the project that I'm also doing in the polder, a really big flat area, which is I think almost 6 meters below sea level. I'm building a hill, and I'm doing this with volunteers from the city, and we're building a hill out of sludge. So we take sludge from the waterways next to a small island. We do it by hand with buckets, and we have these suits that you can go into the water with the boots connected to them. And we just get our hands dirty, and we start taking out the mud from the water, and we throw it on the island and start making a hill. And eventually within the hill there will be like a small amphitheater that will be used by a local farm as a debate center, also to get the get farmers and city dwellers back again and talking again. And next to that, there is it's a facility for music and theater, also to have these themes of climate action in a more creative presence. Yeah, so that's about it. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching that film and for all of the comments coming into the chat. And we're just going to head on quickly to our final speaker, Hannah Rasper, who's here. Hi, Hannah. And I'm just going to introduce you. So Hannah, born in Germany, based in Palermo for 5 years now, is a designer for social impact with a focus on participatory processes. And an infographic artist, the founder of the fairly new grassroots organization Wildfires, exploring wildfires in Sicily and the role of rewilding and grazing systems. And Hannah will be talking today about seagrass meadows in the Mediterranean and these grading systems. Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Eliza. Yeah, I prepared a couple of slides, so I'll walk you through this a little bit visually. And basically running through all the points that Eliza just mentioned. And I would like to start, can you see that well?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, great. I'd like to start with this picture, and I hope that most of you have seen this movie. If not, please do. It's called Alive on Our Planet with Sir David Attenborough. And there's a moment where he says, we must rewild the world. And probably that's the moment when this world rewilding spread into a much larger audience and managed its way into more mainstream awareness. I'm not sure if you are familiar with it, if it's part of your reality already or not. But I'd like to just run through what I understand or what we as a group understand under rewilding. So what that is, I'm borrowing this amazing illustration from Rewilding Europe. Rewilding Europe is like the largest organization, working on rewilding in Europe towards a more like wilder nature and future-looking nature. And what you can see in this picture is like on the top left, you can see the past with a large presence of wildlife on the planet. And then the appearance of us as a species. And then, of course, our most impactful moment in our history so far, the agricultural and industrial revolution, where we like really changed the face of the earth in often not very positive way, and especially about all the topics we've been talking so far. And the birth of the Anthropocene. Rewilding doesn't stop here. It goes beyond, and you can see how the spiral continues. And it also goes beyond these like doom and gloom narratives that many environmental movements are proposing. And it looks into a much more optimistic future and proposes a way forward into a sort of new nature. As we've just seen also in the video by Tom, that we make it ourselves. And in a future where like humans can live in harmony with the animals and the planet, and proposing a vision, which is like very important, as you all know, I guess. It also takes a very holistic perspective, so it goes beyond protecting a certain habitat or protecting a certain species. And the goal of rewilding is to put nature in the right conditions to retake these natural processes again. And it looks into natural aspects, scientific ones, economical ones, cultural ones, and also political ones. And we, as a local group, took a bit the approach of like dig where you stand. And as I mentioned, I'm based in Sicily, and this is where I work in the Mediterranean's largest island. And we baptized our project with Wildfires, and with the goal of like making Sicily a wilder place with happier people and ready for the future to come, as it's like a hotspot for all climate change effects that we can see here. We have a focus on wildfires, as it's like the one limiting factor for all conservation efforts. Like, yes, we can plant trees everywhere, but if it burns the next year, nothing is like gained. And we focus on grazing, like especially wild or semi-wild grazing, as it's this interesting borderline between, it's very much connected to wildfires, as like all wildfires in Sicily and most Mediterranean countries, they're not natural, they're all on purpose, arsenal. And on the other hand, it also represents this very valuable ecosystem service that grazers and grazing animals have. And so that was our focus. And of course, today we wanted to talk about more water-related issues and not much terrestrial. So what does grazing have to do with the sea? And most of you will know there's also seagrass. So, or with the scientific name, Posidonia oceanica. So it's like the pasture of the sea, and it's native to our Mediterranean Sea. And it's like as much as important as like coral reefs or pristine forests to other ecosystems as like the seagrass is to the Mediterranean Sea. And it has wonderful functions. For example, it's like a whole habitat. So it's a nursery for baby fish, for plants and other animals. And if you go snorkeling, you will find like a burst of life on these like dark patches, which are the seagrass of the mud. It prevents erosion of beaches and of coastline. And of course, on the other hand, we started this session with breathing. And if you take a breath and if you take another breath, the second one is from the sea. And Posidonia provides a massive amount of oxygen. So that's our grade. We love seagrass, but it's under threat. And mainly because of like two main factors. One is its biology. It grows very slow, like 2.5 meters of height of like dead meadows and grown over there. Takes 4,000 years of history to grow, and it blooms only every 7 years. So it's just very slow in its reproduction. And not only that, but we as a community like keep on destroying Posidonia on different occasions. The main factor is like direct erosion by anchoring and fishing. As you can see in this picture, just like tearing them apart, or for like shrimp, like bottom trawlers, of course, it destroys all of the seagrass. But there's also water and sediment, which covers it, so it's not able to do photosynthesis anymore. Coastal transformation effects, of course, we have more and more harbors and recreational boats and stuff. Desalination facilities is an increasing factor, because then the water around them gets more salty, of course, and that affects the seagrass. More recently, there's an invasive algae species which is attacking the seagrass, and of course, it's also affected by all kinds of like climate change effects that have to deal with and adapt to. And the last important point about that one is that we just don't know. There is a lack of data and of monitoring, and the Mediterranean Sea is tiny compared to the other world oceans. And so there, we just don't know much about it. And there's also a huge lack of awareness. Like people complain about, the grassy, stinky stuff on the beach. And it's not much in our culture and presence, the importance of it. We don't appreciate it as we do coral reefs, for example. So this is where we came in, and our tiny solution to this big issue, we named it Posidonia Gardeners. And it's going to be a 1-month research sailing trip, inviting marine science students and citizen scientists on board on the research vessel, a sailing boat. And in order to like boost these kind of seagrass meadow restoration efforts, and in very close collaboration with local dive centers, and of course around Sicily. And we're very happy that this project is part of Impetus, which is it's financed by an Horizon program. It's one program of the EU Commission. And yeah, so we're going to start this now, our journey on that one. And when I say we, in this case, we're like teaming up with Project Manaya. We've been working together in the past, and they are an Austrian boat in the Mediterranean Sea, existing like 7 or 8 years. They're a nonprofit, and what they do is doing open research, open marine research. They invite people on board, students on board, to go around and bring on their own research questions and scientific projects. And yeah, enabling people to be in touch with the sea and stewarding it together. And in this specific project, we will monitor the seagrass sites all season long and feeding it into an open database, again, because there's a lack of data. September will be like our like close month or like intense month of the project. And with the marine scientists and the citizen scientists on board, we'll go around the Ionian Islands, which is a group of islands in the north of Sicily. We will set up together with the dive centers, like sort of like drop-off stations for seeds and for plant rip-offs, because they can be replanted, and once they're on shore, they have very little chance to like reforest themselves. So it's a way how to preserve them, to like prep them for their new adventure, and then also to replant them together. So we do the training with them. We will also like then train the dive instructors themselves, so they can do the replanting, the reforesting without us being present, as it's a boat which travels. And of course, then also mapping all of this into the same database. As a very like last point, we are running workshops in each, like with each dive center and the local communities, to push for this Posidonia awareness, so that people recognize the seeds. They look like tiny olives. I don't know if you've seen them, and yeah, understand the importance of it, and they can participate in the replanting, reforestation efforts. And yeah, we hope that that's our like small contribution to a very big mission, to rewilding the sea, to rewilding the land, and also ourselves, for like a wilder world and a happier life for all the generations to come. And if you want to join us, you can follow all the activities on famous social medias. You can check out Project Manaya or the wildfires. And if you want to support the mission of Project Manaya, you can also check out their website and yeah, support their actions on the ground or on the water. And yeah, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to some questions and discussions with you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Do you think you could put the links to those in the chat that
Sure.
you just mentioned? That would probably be great for people. Okay, so we have a few questions that come in, and we also have 15 minutes until the end. So I'm just going to focus on the questions we have for now. And hi, Peter, nice to see you again. I had a question for Peter that I would like to ask to kick us off. One of the people that was going to speak today and wasn't able to attend was someone who runs a community garden in London. And I kind of, from the 9 pathways that you put at the end of your presentation, and one of those being urban spaces, I wondered what advice you would have for the many billions of us that live in cities and so often feel like pretty helpless in terms of making hands-on change.
Yeah, we have a climate conference coming up here soon, and one of the activities we're going to be doing is a walk around the city, starting at the top of a car park where we can see and look out across the landscape and see where interventions can be made. Now, in my country, quite a bit of funding is available for people to do huge murals on the side of walls, and that's great. But living plants on green walls is a fantastic way to cool down hot areas, especially if it's on, in your case, a southern wall, and green roofs, of course. But the other thing we can do, I mean, lawns are vilified, but if you let your lawn grow a little longer, as I think I showed in some of those diagrams, you increase diversity because there's a bit of flowering, and also there's this cooling. So yeah, whatever you can do, the cool cities, check out biophilic cities. biophilic cities include cities like Singapore, Wellington here in New Zealand, Melbourne. Right around the world is a network, and biophilic meaning life-loving. And I think that anything you can do to extend greenery in cities, and of course to slow down the water, permeable pavements is quite a few options you have.
Thank you. This is a really lovely comment in the chat for Hannah from Kurt Kruger saying, thank you for your beautiful soul and your wonderful quest. I just wanted to mention that one. It's such a lovely comment. Peter, you actually had a question for Hannah about mangroves, I think. I wondered if you wanted to ask that one yourself.
Yeah, sure. Now, I'm aware of the Sinai project, but there don't seem to be any mangroves in the Mediterranean. I might be wrong, but it would certainly be warm enough. And mangroves, of course, are so beneficial for the marine environment.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a marine biologist, so I wouldn't dare to say something about that. But of course, I can give my opinion. What I've learned so far about that one. They are not native to the Mediterranean, and we don't know what effects it will cause if we introduce mangroves. But there are no mangrove forests here.
Okay.
It could be warm enough, but I'm not sure what other conditions they would need. I mean, the climate certainly is different. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there are any efforts to introduce mangroves.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and I wonder what that would also do to various ecosystems when you kind of introduce something such a big change. Rob had a question for Peter. You mentioned the 9 pathways again at the end of your presentation. Which pathway, if any, do you think has the most impact the fastest, or is it kind of all at once?
Yeah, I would not identify any single one. I mean, reducing consumption, of course, would have an amazing impact, but there's cultural barriers to achieving that. And I fully recognize the importance of stopping the destruction of forests and reforesting, but equally important is the ocean environment and stopping the destruction of plankton, for example, because we know that, I mean, I don't know the exact figures, but theoretically the ocean's biomass could double in quite a short time. And really what we need to do is just extend life. The way I think about it is that if you liken it to our financial system, cash flow is important, living carbon's important.
Thank you. So Shannon had a question for Hannah as well, saying, Hannah, you mentioned ocean salinity. How is it affected by sea plant life? If you feel able to comment on that.
I mean, it's the desalination, infrastructures, which are at coastlines to create drinking water or to turn it into drinkable water. And of course, when you take salt out of water, it goes somewhere. So they mainly pour it back into the coastlines, which changes the water composition. And again, like seagrass, as any other species, can adapt only so much in a short time. So when you increase the salination of the water, it does affect the plant. It will adapt. It's not dying, but it's not thriving. So it's just another factor that we push it.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, I see you've put your camera on, and actually you had a question for Hannah as well. So I thought you can ask that one if you like yourself.
Actually, no, I just loved the story in itself. And I thought it was a wonderful example of you doing your part of the project. But my main question is, and that's a much more general one. I do believe that we still may have a chance to get out of the mess we're in if we get a mass movement of regeneration everywhere by everyone in their own way, in like Peter shows the 9 pathways, but what do we need to do to actually make this into a movement? At least there should be a large visible carrot, because the stick is very visible, but people don't move.
Well, I'm thinking that I asked that question about reductionism, and if where are you on the pathway of as a recovering reductionist, Rob? Shedding that sort of thinking is probably the way out of the way out of the crisis.
But I guess that in the situation where we are right now, we're basically at the precipice, or maybe we don't even know, we might even already have passed the tipping points, but the only chance I think is massive regeneration by everyone locally. But it means we actually have to have millions of people, roughly starting tomorrow, to do relatively simple things, but they have to be done at scale and everywhere. Otherwise, we're toast.
Well, one thing that people could do is just identify where those strikes are happening on May 26 in your country and join in. Support those young people. I mean, sometimes they might even have trouble getting permission from the school, because it's felt that if they take a half a day off school, it's going to destroy their careers, So get alongside young people and support them humbly.
Yeah, great. That's a really nice comment. I don't see any more questions coming in the chat, so please shout if I've missed it, but otherwise I'll hand it back over to Jim to close us off. And thank you everyone so much for taking part.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and Hannah. Thank you, Rob. Splendid program. I'd like to, just as we're ending here, circle back to my introductory remarks, because I'd like to just hear from you, Hannah, you, Rob, Elisa. How are you processing what's going on globally? We're about ready to cross the 1.5 degrees centigrade threshold. The world is engulfed in war at every level as the superpowers are in increasing confrontation. Climate change is essentially off the table. Fossil fuels are back with a vengeance. And the situation continues to become increasingly precarious. I know we're focusing in on projects like you're focusing in on, Hannah, to make the Mediterranean, a cleaner, safer, healthier place. But how are you just sort of, I would say, almost personally processing the information that's current in the media about the state of the world? Are there any comments that any of you would like to make? Peter?
I'd like to hear Peter's also.
Yeah, I feel that hope is very important. I did some work with young people, and hope in the literature is defined as a sense of agency and pathways for action. And if we can have pathways for action and that sense of agency, we feel like we can do something and we can contribute. And that's why it's so important to expand the range of solutions beyond emissions reduction, because I've seen some of the best work done by people in Africa and India, the poorest people in the world, those that have contributed least to our problems are doing the best recovery work.
Good point. Very good point. So you would go back to agency, personal agency, and whatever else is going on, I'm going to do X to the best of my ability. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
There's a great oppression. You know, when you think of it for young people, I think it's like they don't even want to think about it. I remember on TV here a few years ago, we had a guy called Professor Guy McPherson, who was basically saying we'd be extinct in 8 years or 10 years. And I think that's about 3 years away now. So what do? You know, what do you do when you're faced with that? You just party.
Yeah, I think I would second agency, absolutely. And I think keeping a sense of kind of excitement for that adaptation and the opportunities that it might bring, but through agency and through kinds of hands-on adaptation, and giving young people the tools to feel like they actually can make that change. And a sense of power. That's, I guess, how I try and implement my design work and see it, and where I have a sense of power within this massive problems that we're facing today.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
I recall Paul Hawken.
Oh, Peter, you were going to add a comment?
Oh, I was just going to say, I recall Paul Hawken actually saying this crisis is a gift for us because it causes us to reconceptualize how we live on this planet.
Yes.
Yeah, and what was his turn of phrase that if you're not pessimistic when you look at the facts, there's something wrong with your head, and if you're not optimistic when you look at all the people working for solutions, there's something wrong with your heart. That's a good line.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Very appropriate under current circumstances. Hannah, what would you say?
Yeah, I would like to comment on that one as well. And I think grief is a very powerful emotion, and you can work with that very well because it has a lot of beauty in it. But I would consider, or I count myself as one of the young people, and I'm tired of this narrative of like doom and gloom, everything is terrible, we're the last generation, like this is what I grew up with, which is like constantly of like, you know, this is the end. And it's not helpful. It's definitely not. And we had a discussion just a couple of days ago with Eliza, and we were talking about optimism and pessimism. And I reflect myself very much in that, because like the only thing you gain with pessimism is that you're right in the end, no? And it's not much of a choice. And I think that's the last page of like Noam Chomsky's book, Optimism Over Despair. And it's, I mean, probably not quoted correctly, but that's the message. And I feel all the actions that we do, they shouldn't be sacrifices. They shouldn't feel like sacrifices. Otherwise, it's just, then you go really into despair. But being part of these like small projects and doing groundwork, being with the community and feeling that there's a small impact, it's just the right thing to do. It's but not morally right, but right in a sense of beauty. So there's not much choice. What else would we do with our time? And
yeah, good point. Thank you. Rob, we're getting close to time. I think we should turn to you to conclude and make whatever summarizing statements you want to make over the last 3 days, and anything you want to leave us with.
Well, thank you, and again, thank you very much for this opportunity for us to show the Cooling Climate Chaos project. We're just getting started. Let me first say that I am optimistic, not about humans' behavior, but about the incredible intelligence that is embedded in nature. In 3.8 billion years of nature, and that nature basically is right now there still wanting us, although maybe getting a bit tired of us, to knock on our heads and open up, because the solutions are there. And once this intelligence of nature, of this larger, of the living planet flows through you, then suddenly there is possibility for simple abundance for all. And basically, it could happen anywhere. But I must say, it's on even days. I feel that we're so close that I'm not sure if we're going to wake up on time. It definitely has to happen now. And I think with that, I think also what the main message that Peter and I are telling the world is that we actually have calculated that an X amount of regeneration, which is within our possibilities, could actually stop the warming up of the planet within 20 years and have a positive calming effect on weather systems already within years. So get with it and tell everybody that we actually can get ourselves out of the mess ring. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. And Elisa, thank you for moderating today, and Hannah and Peter for your contributions. I asked you the question that I did is because I think it's so important for all of us as we take in the data of what's going on, that we find wherever that place is in our psyche and soul that maintains our sense of fortitude and personal empowerment. And I think, as I think all of them agreed, in the end, it's around agency. It's around knowing that you're making a difference in the realm in which you've consecrated your activities and your passion and your energy. And that's what we try to do each and every day at Humanity Rising, highlighting the people that are trying to enable humanity to rise without forgetting the precariousness of the world and the ecosystem and the fragility of human relations at this moment. So it's a delicate balance that we all have to hold to make sure that we're focusing our energy in the right place with the right company and community in the right way. And this group of people that you've heard over the last 3 days are doing that. And so I just want to salute everybody who's been part of this 3-day program. And thank you, Rob, for your indefatigable persistence in saving our climate in the ways that you are. And it's an inspiration in and of itself, this kind of program against the backdrop of the news. So that brings our program to a close. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. And then next week we'll start a series of topics of critical concern. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.